This week on The Record, closing arguments. Campaigns enter the closing stretch as time runs out for voters to decide the future of abortion, sports betting, a Senate seat, and control of Missouri's government, all on the ballot. And will Missouri see a close race for Congress? One Democratic challenger hopes so. It's all coming up right now. Welcome to The Record. I'm Mark Maxwell. Missouri is on the brink of making major decisions about its future, and major sports teams are all getting in on the political action pushing for legal sports betting. I sat down with Blues CEO Chris Zimmerman at the Enterprise Center to ask what's in it for them. You don't often see major market sports teams get involved in politics. What's in it for the Blues? Why support sports gambling?
Yeah, maybe in some ways I don't think of this as being involved in politics. I actually think about it as giving Missouri residents an opportunity that much of the rest of the country has, right? You've got 38 states where sports betting has been legalized. You have 7 of the 8 surrounding states to Missouri where you can drive across the border. And so we know that our residents, that our fans, quite honestly, they want to be able to bet legally and safely on sports betting, and we want to help give them that opportunity.
What's in it for the Blues? Is there some profit motive to bring that extra revenue, that extra dollar into the Blues organization?
Sure. I mean, we're a business. We're ultimately a business that really is focused on one thing: investing in our team, working to win a championship, to create a championship team for our fans. But then we also recognize that we're a big part of this community, and we have responsibility. Is there revenue in sports betting for us? Sure, there's some sponsorship revenue. In the scheme of our total revenue, between ticketing, television, all of those things, this is a relatively minor piece. I think the thing that every sports team will tell you, and that we do value, is that sports betting is another way to engage fans. People are showing that they're more involved, at times more interested in our games, and of all sports, when they're also adding sports betting. That's one of the allures to the fan. And obviously, we're competing for people's attention, their time, discretionary dollars. And so we think our product becomes even a little bit more interesting. I often equate it to what you see with fantasy football, which has become such a phenomenon and played such a big role in the growth of NFL football. It's another participation, engagement opportunity.
Sure.
And we think that's a valuable thing for our fans, and we can create value for our sponsors through that.
You're deepening that loyalty and bond with the fan. Would you go so far as to say the absence of sports betting revenue has had a detrimental effect on the competitiveness of the operation or the team? Other markets may have that extra leg in the stool, and during this period when the Blues have not, you said it's a small portion of the pie, but
sure.
Does it carry some
Sure. I mean, whether you're Chicago and whether you're the Blackhawks, whether you're in Nashville, whether you're in other states, sure, those teams have that revenue. I don't look at that in itself as so much a disadvantage as we're giving our fans, our residents, the chance to not on Sunday drive over the bridge to place a sports bet, to be able to conveniently participate, just as residents of the other 38 states that have already legalized sports betting can do.
What guarantees are the Blues prepared to make now around education, specifically around youth, of the downsides of the potential harms of gambling?
Yeah, I think it's hard to state what we're doing around the harms. I think it's really clear what the state has to gain from the revenue, from the tax revenue that'll come from sports betting. The dollars are constitutionally required to go to Missouri education.
Not necessarily an increase, because the politicians could always back that extra 20
You know,
million a
I
year
love
out.
that response. I got asked that by a long-time person who cares deeply about Missouri education. Yep, they can do that. The politicians, the legislature can make any decision at any year. Right. We're not saying we're going to dramatically solve Missouri's education problems, but we know that a big chunk of new money is going to go to Missouri education. Can we say definitively how the legislature will respond? Of course not. But what we can do is say, and we believe the number's conservative, over the next 5 years, adding $100 million to a state's education fund, a state that is still down at the bottom in terms of how we're supporting education. Tell me that $100 million won't find a way to make a difference.
I know that both sides trying to beat this thing up and trying to promote it and sell it, they're conducting polling out in the field, trying to take the temperature of the public to see, is this thing going to pass? So I'm going to propose a bet to you. If you're setting the odds, I don't know, let's say there's 2 minutes left, it's the third period. What's the score of this game? How is it all going to shake out? Is the amendment going to pass?
I do think the amendment will pass. Why? Because of the participation already in sports betting. There certainly is a big chunk of our fans, of our state's residents, that want the ability to simply, safely bet and participate in sports betting. I also think, and I've been told and I hear people understanding that there is a value to what will be contributing to Missouri education.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Enjoyed it. Welcome back. Control of Congress is up for grabs on the ballot this Tuesday as the balance of power hangs in the balance, as it were. Joining us now is a Democrat running in the 2nd Congressional District in Missouri, Ray Hartman, previously founder of the Riverfront Times, now pivoting to challenge incumbent Republican Ann Wagner. We have invited, full disclosure, we have invited the Congresswoman on the program to offer her vision for the future of this country. Unfortunately, we could not make that work before the election. What has this campaign been like in finding avenues, finding voters, finding people who want to hear from her, want to hear from you? Has it been a traditional campaign?
No, first of all, thank you for having me back on. Appreciate that. And I've been having a time in my life. You know, I founded the Riverfront Times at 24, and I found politics at 72. And I really, I cannot tell you how much fun I've had. Like this week in particular with early voting, I've been able to talk to more than 1,000 people a day. And people have been so nice. Mm-hmm. And one of the things they really are nice about is which I had underestimated, was the RFT. And I think the reason that's relevant to this campaign is that people know me. They know and of course, 37 years on Donnybrook. They know I speak what I consider to be the truth without spin. And that's sort of my calling card.
Are you going to bring any of that experience? People vote for candidates for what they can bring to the job. Right. And in this information climate we have, there's big tech decimating local news organizations.
Yes.
And I wonder, do you hope to reform at all the way government supports, stifles the spread of information or the press?
Absolutely. If you want to know what I'm about, people know me for my views and stuff, but this is actually not there are some key issues that we stand upon on, but there's something called the Problem Solvers Caucus in Washington. It's 32 Democrats, 32 Republicans. They get together rather quietly, work across the center, solutions rather than sound bites, and I got to be accepted. I'm gonna, when I win, which I hope to do, that's the first place I'm going, and to try to be part of what we do on Donnybrook was people yelling at each other, sometimes too loud or talking over each other, but we're talking about issues, never calling each other names, and at the end of the day, we're friends.
You're talking about temperament, but I'm asking about, so let's face a problem.
Sure. Right.
Print media is declining, if not dying.
Right.
What's the solution?
I don't think Congress has a solution to it. I mean, it's the culprit, in case of my newspaper, which lasted 46 years but recently passed away, is your cell phone. I mean, it's changed, and the digital age in general has changed the way people get information. There's nothing for Congress to do. We've got some tasks in Congress to make sure there's at least some accountability and reason to the great new frontier of all these digital platforms, and that's a real complex issue. But let me say this about that and other stuff. Whether you talk about that, immigration, everybody wants you to play hero ball. They want you to come in and say, we're good, they're evil. We've got to get away from that. The best solutions, and again, I harken back to our show, is when Democrats and Republicans share and come to the middle. And I really mean that.
Is there
we
an example where you have done that? And I'll ask the question this way. Do you think Donald Trump will win the 2nd congressional district in the popular vote?
Absolutely not. I don't think he may. Who knows what's going to happen?
You expect he'll win Missouri?
Of course.
You
He's
don't
going to
think he'll
win
win the
Missouri. Our polling suggests that I do not think he's going to win the 2nd district.
Are there, you said find the middle. Are there ideas about the economy, about government that Donald Trump has that you would support or endorse?
Well, I don't know that it's hard for me to know exactly what to credit him with ideas. I will say, as far as Democrats and Republicans go, I think the place to start on the economy is a shared sense of accountability and desire to rein in the federal deficit. That's something we should be able to work across the aisle
Tariffs?
on. Tariffs it's just a gimmick. And tariffs, of course you need some tariffs on a limited basis when there's trade improprieties, but everybody
The Biden-Harris
knows.
administration has kept Trump's tariffs in place.
Some of them, and some of them should. But the idea that tariffs are some kind of magic wand, they are, if you overdo them the way he's talking about, they are, of course, just a sales tax. I will say this, tariffs have a role in the mix. The one thing, and I'm glad you mentioned them, this stuff, international trade, is uncomfortably complex. And what we all seem to want is quick fixes, easy answers, sound bites. And most of these issues require the two sides to collaborate.
There's so much we could ask you. I want to do a quick lightning round. Just
absolutely.
get your positions on these things. Sports betting, yes or no?
Yes.
Amendment 3, legalize abortion, yes or no?
Yes.
How much of an impact will that question have in your race?
Our whole key to beating Ann Wagner, and we hope we can shock the world on Tuesday, I know a lot of people aren't expecting it, is turnout, turnout, turnout. It will affect turnout. Early voting is affecting turnout. It has been so gratifying to see thousands of people in line at all these polling places. I've had a chance to meet a lot of them. And we can beat Ann Wagner if we change. We can't change the partisan nature of our system, but we can beat. I believe I will win because of turnout and because of, I believe, my reputation. And she has ghosted the district, but it all comes together.
Democrat Ray Hartman running for Congress in the 2nd Congressional District. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, thank you for having me.
We're back in a moment. Returning now to the record is author Ken Block. He also worked for the Donald Trump campaign in 2020 and 2021 to investigate those claims of voter fraud in that 2020 election, and then wrote that book, Disproven. We've had you here before. Thanks for coming back with us, Ken.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
What are the biggest claims you're seeing now? We've seen some ballot boxes burning in some states. We've seen some issues here. What are the biggest things you're seeing now that give you cause for alarm or maybe give you PTSD from 4 years ago?
What I'm seeing so far are a lot of mistaken claims of voter fraud for the most part. There was a claim of more than 50 people in Pennsylvania all registered to vote at the same address, and it got a lot of play in conservative media. And it turns out that what the person had identified was a church where more than 50 Benedictine nuns were actually living and working and voting. So there was nothing nefarious there, and but there was an awful lot of noise about the fact that whoever was living there was committing voter fraud. They weren't, and apparently they're considering a defamation suit. Most of what's come up so far has been people not understanding what they're looking at, not understanding how elections works. Of course, when someone is firebombing a mail ballot box, that's a somewhat different situation. That happened in Portland, Oregon, which is probably one of the most blue places you can be in the country right now. So that crime, that election crime, was probably not someone on the left doing something wrong. That was probably someone on the right doing something wrong.
We're in that crunch time before the big election of 2024 when everyone's combing through polls, looking for nuggets, trying to deduce any hint in the tea leaves that might alleviate some anxiety and give us some sense of the future. I don't know if you have your crystal ball or Larry Sabato's crystal ball, but I have seen you make something of an analysis online. And it goes back to that cutting edge of persons who find facts and learn from it. You said people who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. What does that portend for the future of this election and outcome in your view?
In 2020, there's documented proof that what was behind Trump's loss was his loss of support from moderate Republicans. It cost him the election in Georgia and Arizona, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin for sure. Tony Fabrizio is Trump's pollster. In December of 2020, he published an analysis of a huge exit poll he conducted, and he determined what I just told you, was that it was the loss of moderate Republican support that explains Trump's loss in that election. Since November of 2020, President Trump has done very little to solve his support problem among moderate voters, regardless if they're moderate Democrats or Republicans or independents. His message has not been for them. His message has been extreme, even more extreme than it was in 2020. What you saw in the 2024 Republican primary was Nikki Haley running against Trump, getting a lot of moderate Republican support. And the amount of support she had should be very disconcerting to the Trump campaign. She got 150,000 votes in Pennsylvania, a state that Trump lost by 80,000 votes in 2020. And that was after Haley had dropped out of the race. She took 250,000 votes in North Carolina, 300,000 votes in Michigan, about 70,000 votes in Georgia. And in every case, the number of votes that I'm talking about is many times the number of votes that Trump lost by in 2020. Trump hasn't solved his moderate Republican problem. And when I refer to looking backwards at history, he does know that that's what caused his loss because his pollster told him that. The fact that he hasn't solved it, I think, is very problematic for him. And if he does lose, I'm confident that this will be why he loses.
I wonder if we can take a moment to lean on your expertise as a data analyst, someone very familiar with election law, to look at some issues in Missouri. The Secretary of State's race, which is the official charged with overseeing the state's election administration. In Missouri, there are two candidates, a Republican and a Democrat. The Republican wants to throw out voting machines, switch to paper ballots, hand count only. Your advice?
You know how many voters are in Missouri, roughly?
There are more than a few million.
Yeah. So Maricopa County in Arizona, I did an analysis where if they tried to count those ballots by hand, there's about 1.5 million voters in Maricopa. Most of them vote. The ballot in Maricopa this year is going to have 70 different different races on it. That's about 100 million different votes that would have to be tabulated by hand.
For all the different races and candidates on the same ballot.
Years. Yeah. It would take many years to get through that. And there's no way that a human being is going to count those votes more accurately than a machine will. It's a terrible idea. It's going to introduce way more problems than it eliminates. And what any reasonable election official should be doing is conducting risk limiting audits, which is a mechanism in which you can determine with great certainty that the machines are doing the right thing. If Missouri isn't doing that, that's what I believe any candidate should advocate for doing at this point. Counting by hand is insanity and wrong and ridiculous.
Ken, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
You'll find a lot more in these expanded interviews up on KSDK.com. Plus, tune into 5 Plus Monday night for an expanded version of this episode. In that, you can watch our full interview with Senate candidate Lucas Kunce alongside actor John Hamm. We're back in a moment. Tomorrow is a great day because you can wake up and go vote. 3 days from now, that chance will have come and gone. So go vote. In fact, you don't need to hear me say it. Let's check the record. Susan B. Anthony said, someone struggled for your right to vote. Use it. And someone else might struggle if you don't. Coretta Scott King, widow to the slain civil rights leader, said, if American women would increase their voting turnout by 10%, I think we would see an end to all of the budget cuts in programs benefiting women and children. Her husband told us, quote, our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. Do you want to measure the amount of injustice in a society? Perhaps you can start with counting the people who don't vote. That's all of our time this week. We'll be back right at the same time next week with all the breakdown, all the analysis of the election that you'll need. Until then, we're off the record.